How would you like to know how some smart, savvy millennials are changing the way they think about wealth building? Can you imagine being financially free at 30? Well, that's the goal of my guest today. Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today. My guest is Jonathan Farber, a side hustle investor from Raleigh, North Carolina. Jonathan currently has 8 properties, which includes 2 Airbnbs at this time, some of which he acquired through house hacking. Now, you might be interested to know that his Airbnbs are doing very well today due to their unique locations. So you're going to love this episode, so let's dive right in. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. I'm excited to have you today.
Same here. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it's always interesting to talk to investors that are, I like to say, different stages, different ages, because they do think about things differently. Like I talked to somebody the other day and he said he started when he was 18 to pay for college. I went, really? You thought about that? So tell me a little bit about how you got started in real estate.
Yeah, I graduated from college. I went to Hofstra University. I played golf there, and I had no interest in real estate, business, anything of the sort until I had a couple things happen in my life where I kind of changed my perspective a little bit. It was some family stuff and seeing some people in my life that had been affected negatively financially, and just kind of changed my path a little bit, got me thinking more about my future, creating a future instead of just going with the flow a little bit more. So got into reading. One of the first business development books I read was Think and Grow Rich, followed by How to Win Friends and Influence People. Still my probably 2 all-time favorite business books. And from there, it just kind of set me on the path of having the right mindset to achieve anything. And if you can really put a plan together and think about it and have goals, it was something that I realized could be amazing. So from there, I just started going really hard with looking for a job out of college. And from that path, I ended up getting connected with someone very high up at the company I'm with now. And he said, move down to Raleigh, North Carolina. You'll start there. That's where everyone starts. And I'm from Long Island originally. I didn't say that, but very expensive place to live. So moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and just kind of got started. And I felt like real estate became a natural progression of business development, personal development from all the reading and content I was absorbing. So got introduced to Bigger Pockets, and I take one step back here. When I got down there, I felt like I could live like a king because I could live in a fully set up apartment with all the amenities for $900 a month, where in New York, that would be like $3,000. Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, this is like Monopoly down here. And I was making an okay salary to start. But anyway, after listening to a ton of Bigger Pockets and speaking with people and reaching out to a lot of people from the show, got introduced to the idea of house hacking. And my mindset totally changed that, wow, I'm actually throwing $900 away every month instead of putting that in my pocket, building equity and starting to cash flow or offsetting that cost. So in 2015, when I was 21, I bought my first single family. I house hacked it. I had 2 roommates, people that I worked with at the company. And then I just did one the next year and the next year. And then when I was going to do my 4th one, which was a 4-unit property that I'm actually in right now, I bought it with an FHA loan. And I had to actually 3 months after move back to New York for work, at which I panicked because I thought they were going to call the loan due. I thought you had to live in it for a year. They said it was okay for work. And then basically I moved back to New York. I did a couple other projects from there. I've done a couple other projects this year, which I'm sure we can get into, but that's kind of how I got started and introduced to real estate, just with learning and feeling like I had enough base knowledge to just jump in and take action and then figure it out along the way.
So are you in New York now or Raleigh?
Right now I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay. So, but you have to go back to New York from time to time.
Yeah, well, I was in New York after 2018. I moved back officially, and I'd been there until this past spring. And I was back and forth there this past spring. But when coronavirus hit and everything became virtual and our office announced that no one was going to be needed in person until October at the minimum, I decided to take some massive action. I actually moved to Kentucky for 2.5 months. And I spent some time in Indianapolis and a couple other places where I was prospecting for real estate. And it was an amazing experience. I was looking for multifamily stuff this spring and still am, but basically just took that as an opportunity of, I don't have anything tying me anywhere. it's a virtual world now. Why not live in a territory? So did that, got the experience, and now I'm back in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm living in this 4-unit property so that I can do a refinance loan that I need to live in the property to do.
Right. Well, that's a smart idea, especially it gives you the flexibility to have your rent paid and you can go off and travel. You should definitely do that while you can, because it probably won't last forever. But so your plan going forward is to continue to house hack then for a while.
Well, I look at it like this. This is what I tell a lot of other millennials or just people that are looking to start is I think about it like your 20s are the time to build your wealth. And then after that is maybe the time to preserve it and grow it. But I look at it like if you're trying to show off in your 20s, you're making a huge mistake. You're crippling yourself financially. Not that I don't like making money and I don't like nice things. I just like nice things. I just think I need less of them than most people. But for me, I've house hacked a couple times. I think it's the best thing a young person can do to start out, or anyone can do to start out if their family or spouse is willing or would let them. I've heard that a lot of times also that, my husband or wife doesn't want me to do this because they have a certain standard. Totally understand. But for me, it's more about basically just setting myself up for the future with some slight sacrifices I can make now. And then, I have aggressive goals to be financially free before 30. So this is setting me up to do that. But yeah, right now I moved back into a 4-unit property, which, maybe is a little bit of a change in lifestyle, but it's going to enable me to do a cash out refinance that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
No, I think it's a smart idea. I mean, I think you're definitely thinking way ahead of what most people your age are thinking, because most people are thinking about the car, and they may even be buying a single family house. But in your case, I mean, certainly, especially if you're single or maybe in the early years of being married, it's a great way to, like you said, to build wealth. And it makes me happy that you're smart enough to think about that, because I don't see a lot of people thinking that way.
I want to actually talk about this a little bit. I'm going to make a post about this for the exact concept that I talked about. When I moved down to Raleigh in 2015, I thought I was the man. I was moving into a beautiful apartment. I had a great corporate job, and I was spending all this money at the time to live this lifestyle. And now 5 years later, I'm moving into a 4-unit place that people would look at and say, wow, you're taking a step back. It's actually a step forward only because I have the education. So I don't necessarily, the way I think about it is I think people want to do it. They just don't know the steps, or they don't know the effects or the repercussions of the negative things they're doing in their early years that have huge like multipliers down the road if they just do the right steps in their early years. I don't think they know, and they just see everyone around them as keeping up with the neighbors as, oh, I need to go live in this apartment for $3,000 a month, or I need to go buy my house or drive this car. And it's just what they think they should be doing. So reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, reading how to like all the other real estate books can just give you that kind of base knowledge, how to house hack, how to burr, all that stuff. And then I think their mindset changes. At least that's what happened to me.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think probably people don't know that it's possible. Certainly if you haven't stumbled upon a blog, or someone that's doing it, you very likely don't know that this is the way. And I've had a conversations recently with several different investors about the serious lack of financial education in our school systems. It drives me crazy to see these that they have no concept of money. I think I've got a granddaughter who's now in college, and it's not her fault. We're always trying to teach money lessons, but we were not taught that. My girls were not taught that in school. And I look here all these years later, you would think the schools would be smarter. I think there should be some sort of financial education classes required before they ever get out of high school. And then again, if they go to college, because you don't know what you don't know.
Nailed it. And I remember taking accounting because I thought it would help me financially and learn about how to manage money myself. And it just did the opposite. I mean, it didn't hit me until my first mentor out of college, who's probably one of the wealthiest people I've had the chance to get to know, put it to me as simply as this: don't take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with in that specific field. And it's a little harsh, I get it, but it was more or less that moment that I realized everyone has an opinion. If I'm listening to a college professor that's never started a business and they're telling me how to run a business, or they're telling me how to manage my finances, and I don't know how they're managing their finances, it's just not the advice that I think I need or want to follow. And I don't think people need to be rude about it, but after changing that mindset in my head, it just became more, I'm going to chase the advice from the people I admire or trade places with, or would be considered an expert in that field. And I think what happens in college or school, or people who just at a young age, they think adults have the answers, is they just listen. And that's not at fault of them. We're creatures of our environment. But if you're taking in the wrong information from the wrong people, it's probably the biggest disaster or the biggest mistake people could make, because what you feed your mind is what you end up becoming.
I love that. So don't take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with. You put that a little bit different way than what I generally hear, but that is so true. And I think if you ask yourself that at every crossroad, that's really good advice, for sure.
Total. I mean, think about it. Like, people are taking marriage advice from somebody who's been divorced 3 times. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But people do that financially and in real estate every day. They listen to their uncle who tells them being a landlord is the worst thing ever because you're going to be plunging toilets. And that landlord or that uncle, he's never even done it, or he did it and had a horrible experience. So why are you like, every time now I get advice, I assess the source, the origin, and the experience. And from there, I know how credible is this advice. Like, another great book, someone I really admire, Ray Dalio, Principles. And he's all about basically understanding candor and the flow of information. You know, how do you make your decisions? And I think a lot of the decisions I was making in my early years were just basically flawed. And now I look at it a lot differently.
Well, and you've hit upon another point, which is really big for me. Readers are smarter than the rest of the world. I mean, not smarter, they're more well educated, and they know things that other people don't know. So I always look at people that haven't read a book in 5 or 10 years or since forever, and there's no way to be in business and stay up on the curve if you don't read. You simply cannot do it. It's my opinion. You will be stuck at whatever stage you are in your business right today forever if you don't get new ideas and constantly be challenging yourself and your mind to move up, to change, to pivot. Here we are in the middle of this pandemic. If you don't pivot, you're toast. You have to figure out a way to take these lemons and make lemonade out of it.
So true. And the way it's I mentioned it before, but the more I think about it, it's if you don't put new information in and new ideas in, you're gonna do the same that you've always done. And it's just not gonna work.
Yeah. So let's talk about your properties. So I kind of looked, I asked you for some information because I find a lot of times I've been guilty of this. Don't keep my bio updated to the T. So you have 8 properties at this time. So you have, is it 6? Are they all multis, or is it 6 single families? You said you have 2 Airbnbs. What's the mix of the properties?
So the mix currently is 2 single families, 1 4-unit, and then 2 other single families that are for Airbnb.
Okay, so 2 single families, 4 multi.
One fourplex, so
1
4 doors, and then 2 single families that are just standalone rentals, traditional.
Okay. So my next question is, I know some people that are struggling with their Airbnbs. What's going on in your areas? Because I know one person that was her main source of income. She had a killer Airbnb, and suddenly nobody was coming.
Yeah. So I probably started my Airbnbs at the worst time possible. I'm not going to have much actionable advice here for the audience, because I actually felt like I got very lucky with mine. I guess I could make a little bit of a tangible comment for people that are looking to do Airbnbs going forward, which I do think will bounce back. But I kicked off 2 Airbnbs in a very remote location, which For those that have been following this, the Airbnbs that have been hit the hardest are in traveling destinations of conferences, business, cities, things like that. That's one side of it. The other side of it that has done really well are the Airbnbs that are in remote locations or escape destinations, which I would classify my properties as being, as they're in Pinehurst, North Carolina, where a lot of people went to escape or just go and play golf, and they never shut down based on coronavirus. So I got lucky with that. My properties, the two of them, when they get kicked off within a week, got both 60-day bookings for people that were looking to get out of big cities. And one pivot I made though is I changed it from nightly to 2 weeks or monthlies. And by doing that, it definitely attracted people that were in that category of looking to get away from an issue or get away from a city and just kind of hide out. And that's how we pivoted. And then we were looking a lot at traveling nurses, army soldiers, or just people in the army that were maybe needed longer term stays, because that's something I still think there's a shortage of, is furnished housing on a 1, 2, 3 month basis. Like if you go on Airbnb right now, you really can't find that because most of the bookings are in 1 to 2 night increments, and they kind of throw off a whole month. So for those that are maybe out there wondering, I'd say remote locations are still going to be great going forward. And if you keep yours as a monthly or 2 month or 3 month rental, I think you can do really well with it. And that's kind of what our plan has been, or my plan has been.
Yeah, that's a great pivot idea, because I know several people that have, like you said, maybe mountain property or a lake property that's out and away, and they're renting very well. And so, yeah, that's a definite thing. Now, I also know somebody here in Louisville that has a property kind of in a hip area, and I'd be curious to know how that's coming, because if you take away conventions, you take away derbies, it was geared more toward executive, I would say executive level rentals, beautiful rental. And so I think you're right though. You've got to pivot, and I think where you buy and where you have your Airbnbs, this is probably a lesson going forward for people. If you're going to do Airbnb, think about it from a perspective of, what if this happens again ever? We get through this and it happens again. How are your properties going to be? And I think it's a case too, when you're buying a single family home rental today. I saw this in 2008. Used to be, there were classifications of properties. There were flips over here. They were great, profitable rehabs. And over here, there were rentals. But there was this juncture at which the flip would not necessarily cash flow if you had to rent it. It was just outside the parameters. So in 2008, I had my investors that were buying my deals came and said, look, we have a new thing now. If we cannot sell this house, we have to be able to rent it to where it cash flows. And that changed my whole buying criteria. And I think people today need to think about that too. What's your plan B if your plan A for your rehab doesn't exactly work out the way you planned it?
Totally. And for those were our immediate backup options, but I was prepared to turn them into traditional rentals. And I also think now it makes, like, I think the opportunity for Airbnb right now, for anyone listening is looking to get started, I think Airbnb buying a standalone house is a great option, because I think people will like that, as opposed to going to hotels with shared spaces. So they can be basically inclusive with their people that they're traveling with. And it's another reason that we could talk about this also if you want. It's another reason why I'm a big proponent of Airbnb arbitrage, or short-term rental arbitrage, where you don't actually own the property to put it on Airbnb. You're renting the property and then you're putting it on Airbnb. I like that model because it limits your risk a lot. Basically, if this happens again, you're only on the hook for 12 months and you can just give the keys back, as opposed to owning, and then you've put 20% down or maybe less, and now you're on the hook for something that won't cash flow.
Mm-hmm. So what special permissions do you get from the person you're renting from? Do you get the sublet in your lease, or how do you handle that?
So I don't own any currently or operate any Airbnb arbitrage properties currently, but I have two close friends that are very successful with it to the point that they're cash flowing on a regular basis much more than traditional rentals, and they're full time with it, so they're doing well enough with it that it supports them. But basically, what they do is they have scripts and they have basically their pitches to these landlords that they're coming in willing to sign long term leases, high security deposits, paying market rent or maybe a little over market rent, depending on how well they think they can do with Airbnb. And they are just being upfront and transparent with the owner, saying, "Hey, this is my business. I operate basically a corporate housing company, and as a part of that, we relist a lot of rentals designated for certain types of people on Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway. And I'm going to be upfront with you. That's what this is going to be used for. I will use it from time to time. And if the owner is okay with it, great. If not, they move on." But from that standpoint, the way that they position it, they're appealing to the owner's interest. It is pretty compelling. I'd love it if someone came along and said they'd pay high security deposit, market rent, and sign a 2-year lease, and they were going to clean the property professionally every week or so. It doesn't sound that bad. And if you look them up and see they're a good operator and see that they take a lot of pride in having good reviews, it's almost on them to make sure that the property is in good shape. So that's how they come at it.
Yeah. So they're just upfront with what's going to happen. So it's a win-win. That would require the place to be furnished. So then do they rent furniture, or did they invest in furniture? How did they handle that part of it?
The friends of mine that do it, they typically buy furniture. They're like deal shoppers, or they'll find good deals on Facebook Marketplace. I don't know that they've rented any furniture. Some of the places I know may have come furnished. But yeah, I guess a mix of things. That is the one, I would say, downside that I think about with it is, let's say you had to shut down a bunch of these at one time. You'd have furniture from 10 different places. But I guess, that could happen in a couple different scenarios, but they buy it and then they furnish it.
Yeah. That's what my friend did, of course.
Yeah.
So tell me, let's go back to your first deal. Tell me, so somebody's listening to this and they'll go, well, he just came out of college, he moved into this fancy apartment, then he decided to change directions. So what did your first deal look like? Was it a Class B property? Was it in the area where you were living? Or tell me about how you chose that property.
So that property, big learning. I was looking for a long time. When I say long time, it wasn't that much time. It was just a lot of properties that I went and saw because I wanted to get a feel for how this all worked. And I was a total beginner. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anyone in my family that could help me. It was just reading BiggerPockets, reaching out. Another thing I did at the time, I reached out to every single guest that was ever on BiggerPockets. So that was a good way to, from the beginning, at least up to that point, it's maybe 200 episodes. So maybe I reached out to 100 and got responses from X number, but asked all my dumb questions. So I went and just saw any type of single family I could that I thought kind of met this criteria. I would look up just rents on Rentometer. I would try to find properties under 150,000. Spoke to a couple banks to get an idea of what I'd get approved for, how little I could put down, and if I would still be able to break even or maybe cash flow. So I probably saw about 50 properties, and my realtor, I'll give a lot of credit to. She's very patient with me because, I mean, she knew a lot of these were bad ones, and she knew what I was looking for as a beginner. But it actually ended up being an apartment, I guess a condo, and it was a 3-bed, 2-bath just outside of NC State. And it was pretty much it was an MLS deal, found it on the MLS, didn't negotiate too much on it. I mean, I think maybe after the inspection, knocked like $5,000 off. The final list price, I think, was $120,000, very low. And yeah, we just did it. I mean, moved in. I had 2 people confirm that would be tenants or friends of mine that needed a place to live. I was asking around all over the place. I was willing to have friends of friends, through Facebook and stuff. I was just kind of hustling to find roommates, and there's always people looking for roommates, just, I guess, the quality. Mm-hmm. And that was the first deal.
Well, that's pretty cool. So you just it was a condo, you just filled up the bedrooms and helped pay the rent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was just friends of mine who I'm still really good friends with today.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So, what is your long-term strategy? I think I read somewhere that you wanted to get larger multifamilies. So what's your strategy with that? Okay, still a mix of single families, or, are you going all in on bigger apartments?
So going all in on that, I pretty much uh, for a while I thought, wow, a lot of people end up getting here, or they do like 5 to 10 years of single family, smaller deals, and then they progress to that. So I tried to just dig into it more to understand the reason why they do that. Like maybe I could jump a level or two. And if all these smart people are doing it, I'm not that smart, but maybe I can just kind of find a shortcut. And there's a lot of reasons why. The main ones are economies of scale, and the ability to add value in a different appraisal model. And what I mean by that is if you fix up a single family home, it'll be based on the appraisal will be based on comps in the neighborhood. If you fix up a multifamily home, the value is based on the amount of NOI or revenue that it generates. So if you can do the right repairs and make it generate more revenue, you can significantly improve the value of the property, and then you have more equity options to do a cash out or a HELOC, whatever. So my last 3 months, my business plan was I was doing cash out refinances of all my properties, to try to become as liquid as possible. I was trying to downsize and cut all my costs to live below my means and be prepared to act in anything that comes up, or any opportunity based on coronavirus. And I don't look at it like I'm hoping stuff happens, but I just think there will be distressed
Yeah.
properties. And yeah, that's why I went out to Kentucky and Ohio and a couple other places. Is I just wanted to see these properties and meet the people involved in 20 to 40 unit apartment buildings, and just get into the game with that. Meet the right brokers, meet the right property managers, meet the right operators, and walk deals. And when I was out there, I probably walked about 75 deals
Wow.
over 3 months between those couple states, and just the education was incredible. But for me right now, my lead measures are I try to analyze one multifamily value add deal a day, and what I like to do is make one offer a week, and it's in that sweet spot of 20 to 40 unit value add property, um, off market, on market, either or. But that's where my focus is right now.
So have you considered master lease options at all?
Yes, I have. I just haven't come across them that often, but I've a couple of my, I'd say now, syndicator mentors or just multifamily mentors have used that to get in the game, but I haven't come across it that much actually.
Well, I have a friend who does that, so I can tell you about that. But he says he likes to say, as I said to him one time, do you put money down on these deals? And he said, once I made a mistake, put $500 down. Never did that again. So, but he says something that because I had trouble wrapping my brain around why would a cash buyer or a seller who wanted cash suddenly decide to not take cash and take your strange terms and let me lease option the property for 3 to 5 years. And he said, well, listen, nobody ever woke up and said, I've decided I don't like cash. I'm going to master lease option my property today. So he has a methodology about going about making a lowball offer for cash, or I can give you your asking price in 3 to 5 years. You can get the cash you're getting now, but so there are two schools of thought on this too. Value add, where you're going to put your money into it. Well, you don't really want to do that because you don't own the property. And if you're like him, there is no money leaving his pocket to fix up repairs on somebody else's property. But
Right.
he's been very successful because of the formula for multifamilies. If you buy them at today's value and you see that you can increase occupancy or whatever the deal is that makes them so unhappy, and you can give them the cash they're getting today and you can figure out how to make more and make the spread, it's a very viable way to scale your business in the multifamilies. Then when you go to do a cash out, cash refi in 3 years or 5 years, if you've picked the right property and you've done everything right, it will be worth a whole lot more money, and then you don't have to bring any money to closing.
Hmm.
So, but if you have totally mucked it up and bought a property that tanked, guess what? You get to walk away.
That's a really good point.
You haven't lost a dime. All you're doing is deferring the day you actually close on the property. So something to think about.
That's really interesting. It makes me think about the way a lot of these negotiations started. They weren't master lease, but they were something that now conceptually I think is similar. These were a lot of owner finance conversations.
Yes.
But those are still requiring a lot of money down at the beginning, typically 20%. But what I was finding, and I do think this will still be the case going forward the next couple of months for any multifamily investors out there who may not think they'd qualify with a bank loan for multifamily, is as coronavirus hit, the banks tighten their lending. Mm-hmm. So owners realize that if banks aren't lending as much, my property just became worth less because my buyer pool just shrunk. So what I found on this Midwest trip was tons of owners were willing to do seller financing to retain the value of their property. Mm-hmm. And seller financing has so many benefits, but I'd say a master lease option actually would be more desirable. So I'd actually love to talk more about that, but this is just how I was structuring them.
Yeah. So as one thing I've learned about creative finance is there is no one way to do it. And there are many ways. And very often what I see today is it's a combination of things. Maybe you've got a private money lender, not a hard money lender, but a private money lender loaning you a down payment and maybe to give the seller some money. And then they're carrying back financing again for whatever you can negotiate. It reduces their capital gains. And if they know they're getting their money in 3 years, 5 years, whatever, I think it was one mistake I made early on was thinking, okay, here's what I do. I buy single family houses and this is the way I buy them. And I missed out on a lot of deals because I didn't know creative finance strategies, or really, I kind of had a model, and if it didn't fit my model, then I wasn't interested. Big mistake for sure. But I think today, there's so many more options and there's so many ways to learn about doing all these strategies. I think you can totally nail it in that too. But the one thing you can't do is pay full price all the time. Mm-hmm. You've got to have some kind of a win there. At least that's my feeling, because you never know what's going to happen in the world. So if half your tenants go home to live with mom, then you've got to go, okay, where's my property going to be? Because that has happened too.
Sure. Absolutely.
Well, I can't not talk about marketing. So what have been your ways of marketing for properties?
So I kind of stumbled into a strategy for finding off-market multifamily deals that I hadn't really heard anyone else talk about. And I still don't know if basically it's a strategy that people use, but here's what I was doing to find a lot of these deals. Two main ways to find off-market multifamily deals, or I guess it could apply to single family too. But the first way was when I was out in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indianapolis, almost any time I drove by a property that looked somewhat interesting to me, I would do two things. I'd put it into Deal Machine, which is an app that can give you information on the property, the owner, the address, the phone number. And then what I would do is if it had any for rent signs in front of it, I would call on the for rent signs. And I would say very casually, hi, I'm considering moving to this area. I'm also an investor. Don't know if it's totally out of the question, so just feel free to shut one of these down. But I am looking for a place to rent and live, but I'm also an investor, so I'm also looking for maybe a place to buy, and I invest in some apartment buildings. But I saw this was for rent. I was just calling on the sign. I can't tell you how many times I had a positive conversation with someone who was willing to meet me at the property because I didn't come about it aggressively saying, hi, will you sell me your apartment? Yeah. And I went and met them, and still very casual and very respectful, and just built that relationship. So and then if I didn't get a response or they weren't so nice, I had them in Deal Machine, which is that app I could send direct mail to, or I could have my virtual assistant cold call. So that was the first way, but I was so surprised how many potential leads came from that, and relationships got started with either landlords or property managers. And then the second way I was finding off-market deals was same way kind of to get contact information, but I was calling property managers that managed these apartment complexes that I was interested in, and basically just explaining them the situation and who I was and what I was looking for. And what I didn't really understand at the time is that a lot of these property managers also double as brokers or agents. They actually have to be in a lot of cases to become a licensed property manager. So a lot of them kind of jumped at the opportunity to carve out a portion of the portfolio they manage, so that they could basically then offer up a chance to get a commission on a purchase. So if I went back to them and said, hey, I'm looking for 70 units, and let's say they're a property manager that manages 500, they could carve out 70 of those and take offers back to their owner, and it wouldn't be a challenge because they have that owner's attention in that ear.
Yeah.
And that's how I found a lot of leads. I would say maybe like 15 buildings I found that way, just through property manager relationships that would take offers back to owners and get the ball rolling. So those are the 2 or 3 main ways.
Yeah, that's been something that has changed in a lot of areas in the past couple of years, is that property managers now have to either have a real estate license or they have to be a broker, or it didn't used to be that way. But one more layer to the investors challenging toolbox.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay. I didn't know it was a newer thing. I just thought it was okay. Good to know.
Yeah, no, it was not always that way, at least not in my area.
Huh.
So you mentioned one thing which I wanted to touch on before we wrap this up, that you send your initial deals over to someone to do the initial analysis. How does that work?
So as you know, and you have some help as well, I'm pretty obsessed with systems and leverage and process. I kind of look at it like there's only 3 things that I can be doing or should be doing as myself. And I actually have them written up here. I try to look at them every day. Creating the vision for your life, which is your goals, networking, creating relationships, and taking care of your mind and your body, keeping yourself healthy. Other than that, I feel like everything else can be kind of leveraged and outsourced to a degree, depending on how much it costs or how much money you have. So for that example of deal analysis and neighborhood analysis, let's say I'm on the road and I see a property or I drive by, what I'll do is now I'll send a message to someone that helps me with deal analysis on Slack. I'll just send them the address. They have the tools that we've come up with for neighborhood analysis, city analysis, and then deal underwriting. And they will do a first pass. And based on the criteria we've come up with, they'll pretty much spit out I'd say a first draft of, does this property meet our business model? Right. And now they do that. And then I'll dig into it more. And if it's really good, I'll dig into it then more with a mentor or someone that, I really trust and advise. But, that's typically my process. And that saves me a lot of time, but it's also an activity I just don't like doing. Like the thought of sitting behind a big screen and analyzing deals in neighborhoods all day, it's not my skill set. It's not my superpower. It doesn't get me fired up. But meeting people and walking deals and cultivating relationships, I love that. That's like what gets me so excited. So I kind of just found that as a sweet spot, that something I could kind of delegate and I didn't like doing. A great book, Free to Focus, one of my favorites, talks about like your interest zones and then like your biggest disinterest zones, or like the zones you hate. And I found this to be kind of a mix of hate and not interested. So I put it in there, and now that's how I set it up.
That's really smart. Another book that I love for that along those same lines is Clockwork. That you should protect your kind of like your QB, your queen bee role. You protect that. This is Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First, and he wrote Pumpkin Plan. So he wrote that book, and I read it as I was flying on a trip. And he talks about that, about you need to identify exactly the few things you should be doing, and that's it, because you should focus on that. And that's the way you will like that book, because it's a very similar way of thinking. But okay, so we're going to wrap this up with your podcast. What made you start a podcast, The Millennial Millionaire Through Real Estate?
Yes, that was mainly after reading probably my favorite real estate book of all time, based on what I'm interested in, which is Joe Fairless's best ever apartment syndication book. And I remember I read it on a flight, and one of the main things he talks about that you need to be able to build your brand or raise money or source deals is to have a thought leadership platform. People need to know who you are.
Yeah.
And I always thought about it from the sense of, I need to know other people, but that's not scalable. People need to know who you are.
They
And
need to
if they
know who
listen,
you are.
exactly. Like I heard that, and it was such a
Yeah.
mindset shift because I was going one-to-one with so many people, and it was great. I had a lot of close relationships, but I needed a way to scale and reach more people. So he's got the longest running daily real estate podcast. He's done over, I want to say 2,000 episodes. And he is I'd say real estate, idol. Like he's done more in 11 years than I think anyone has. I think now he controls about 900 million in apartment buildings, and he's done that in 11 years. So, and he's got a very interesting upbringing, but basically he talked about you need thought leadership. So I came home that day and said, I have no clue how to start a podcast. I literally don't even know what a microphone is. I don't know what software to use. I don't know anything, but I just need to put a how in front of that problem, and then I'll figure it out. Someone's done it. Thousands of people have done it. So if I just do a little bit of legwork, and something I love with all these processes, Sharon, is I love to stink at the beginning, because that's just embracing the suck. Another great book, and another person I just love is David Goggins. And you just got to lean into that pain at the beginning a little bit. So started the podcast, was horrible, had no systems, didn't know what I was doing, hate the sound of my own voice, hate the process of editing videos. I don't even know how to do it, but I just needed to start. And in doing that, I can safely say it's been the best habit that I've probably developed my entire life, just for the reasons of three things. You build thought leadership so people know who you are. Two, you get smarter. And three, you network better than any way possible, because you give people a reason to get on the phone with you. Some people, they won't do it if it's not self-serving. And I understand that. So for anyone out there considering, I think it's the best thing you can do. Start a podcast, start a thought leadership platform, so that you have this access to people, you can get smarter, and people know who you are. So for me, it's been amazing. We target millennials who are trying to become financially free before 30, but it's good for anyone who's just looking to add passive cash flow.
Yeah, I think, I've always said that networking is one of the most valuable yet underrated things on the planet. But, and it is truly, it took me a long time to figure out that it's not really who you know, it's who knows you. You want them to come to you. But podcasting, I can say, has opened up so many doors for me. And you meet people from all around the country. You get to help them become more visible. And at the same time, you increase your visibility. But there is a win-win for everybody. And I've met so many people, and of course I know Joe. I met him on a podcast. So it's just crazy how this world circles around. Now, when I met Joe the first time, Joe Fairless, he was buying his first property.
Wow, was it that one in Cincinnati?
Yes, he had just bought the first one and had started working on a second one. So it's been fun. You know, we all say, well, that was about like 2 or 3 years ago. Well, no, it was longer than that. So you know how it always seems like it was like yesterday or last week or something. But I've had a lot of those lately where I've gone back. Some guests have been on a couple times over the years, and we'll go, dang, it's been how long? So it's fun. That's another fun thing about podcasting, though, is you get to catch up with people, and you go, I remember when you were here, and now you're here. It's fun. It is totally fun. It's to geek out on watching other people succeed. So what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you, Jonathan?
Probably either Instagram or the Facebook group, LinkedIn, Instagram, or the Facebook group. So my name on LinkedIn, just Jonathan Farber, no H in the JON part. Instagram, JON JFARB. And then the Facebook group is really where there's a ton of cool stuff coming out. Deal analysis, guest interviews, just guides, templates, calculators. And that's just Millennial Millionaire through Real Estate Facebook group. Or if you just search my name in Facebook, you'll probably find it. So those are probably the best ways. If anyone has questions or wants to connect further, anything that I said didn't make sense, or you just have more questions on, please feel free to reach out anytime. I'd love to try to help and give back. And anyone that I could help get their first deal done or their 10th deal or whatever, if there's anything even from a system standpoint I could help with, I love the chance to do that, and want to try to help as many people as possible while I'm on this planet. So that's the goal.
That's a great goal. Leave your memory. Well, it was great having you on today, Jonathan. So thanks so much. Folks, be sure to check out his podcast, The Millennial Millionaire Through Real Estate, and I'll put the links all down here in the show notes. And thanks to all the listeners that come out week after week. And please do us a favor and leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate it. So I will see you all same time, same place next week. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks again.